The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Why does every recipe I try need 18 ingredients, including a jar of something paste I'll never use again, but will sit in my fridge for 9 months? I just want dinner in the oven, fast. That's why I love Blue Apron's new one-pan assemble and bake meals. They send you fresh ingredients that are already chopped. All you do is put it all together and bake. That's it. No chopping, no weird leftovers, just delicious, easy-to-make meals. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Welcome along to this bonus edition of Muchie and Deno. We're recording this one with Wolves still searching for a new manager on Thursday evening, with Rob Edwards' name in pole position. We've just got Robbie tonight. Muchie isn't with us. Deno, how are you?
I'm very well, Johnny.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. So much happening since we last recorded a podcast. It's a couple of days till the Chelsea game now. But what have you made? Let's go back to the beginning. What have you made of Vitor Pereira's departure and the events that unfolded since we last met?
I think obviously that I was at a couple of games recently, the Burnley game at home, and also the Chelsea game. And you look back at those games and really the atmosphere in the stadium. Obviously the games actually were kind of half decent games to watch, but unfortunately Wolves come out on the wrong side of results. But everything just seemed to be going against them at this moment in time. The atmosphere between the fans and the players, and obviously the owners as well, has turned pretty toxic over a period of time. And I think, we've got 2 points after 10 games, so that tells you everything, Johnny, really. And it's a case of needs must now. There had to be something had to give. Manager normally suffers because of that, and I think that's what happens. But it's going to be very, very difficult now for someone to come in and try to get the fans back on the side again, because it has been pretty toxic down there in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, and horrible to see, horrible to listen to at times, but it's understandable from the fan scenario, and hopefully they get someone in pretty quickly, and we try to move on from here now.
Vitor Pereira has since made it clear that he probably should have left in the summer, and he wasn't happy with the situation when he basically, I imagine, just worked out what was going on and worked out that he didn't really have the squad he wanted. And then you look at that team selection against Fulham, and there's no Andre, there's no Joao Gomez. It pretty much looked as if he'd just given up by then and was, if nothing else, just almost pushing Wolves to make a decision.
But Johnny, the strange thing for me that it really is, the manager comes at this point and he says that he should have left in the summer. Now that's a bit disturbing for me, with regards to supporting the club and following the club. The fans must look at that and think, what is going on behind the scenes? Obviously, he wasn't happy with the players that were brought in. Results have kind of proved that as well, but it's a case of, with chopping and changing and trying to pick your right team or trying to pick your best team. It's been happening now for 3, 4, 5 weeks. 10 games into the season, you still haven't found your best team. But even you look at it and you see there's very few leaders on the pitch. He's had 3 or 4 different captains. And that tells you everything about leadership, maybe in the dressing room, leadership on the pitch. But also the players that he feels weren't good enough whenever he brought them in the first place. So was he in charge of players that were coming in, or was he not? So it's very, very disappointing and a bit concerning, really, to hear what he actually said with regards to he should have really left in the summer. And if for someone to come in now and try to pick up the pieces off the back of that is it's going to be a difficult job.
Yeah, we spoke about this after the Brighton game, I think, when we were looking at the players that had left that we felt had been missed. Reinhard Nori, Mateus Cunha, and Nelson Semedo in particular. I remember saying that, he was going to be a particular miss. And you look at the way the new players have come in and not really hit the ground running. Apart from Ladislav Krejci, it looks like the holes vacated by those outgoing players haven't really been plugged at this stage. And they just look they just look at like a team searching for some sort of leadership and searching for some sort of form.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned three players there who, for me, you could put them down as near enough being world class players. Really, what Semedo has played for Barcelona, played at high levels for a long, long time. Seemed to be a real stable influence in the dressing room and respected in the dressing room. Cunha was a genius at times, really. He masked probably what was going on at the club last season because of his performances. Got them out of jail a little bit with regards to avoiding relegation last season. So that was a massive loss as well, which I think everybody knew that was coming, but it's still a massive loss to your side. And obviously Nuri as well, who over the period of 3-4 years that he was at the club just got better and better, and obviously turned into a fantastic player. But the thing for me really is, Johnny, that you kind of know that you're better players. Where Wolves are at the moment, in the bottom half of the division, struggling for the last 2 or 3 seasons, you kind of know that your best players are going to move on, right? So you have to be proactive in actually trying to replace them along the way. And Wolves, for me, haven't been proactive at all. They've all of a sudden they've turned around and Semedo's left, right? Who are we going to get to replace Semedo? Nuri's left. What are we going to do in that position? And even the Cunha scenario. Well, everybody knew Cunha was going. So they should be more proactive to try and get someone. You're probably not going to get the standard of Cunha, but try to get someone close to what you have, and that's going out of your club. So. But they didn't seem to be proactive at all. All of a sudden, you're standing still in the summer, trying to get players in, bringing in players maybe that weren't on your list at all, and that's why you've lacked quality this year. And yes, you're right. Some players hit the ground running, some players don't, and I think you're finding that now. But it's you can't keep doing that year in year out because you'll end up struggling, and that's what they're finding now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because fans will always be very passionate and very opinionated when it comes to the situation, and obviously this situation is pretty grim, and there's been huge amounts of criticism. But I don't think when you look at the sort of hierarchy at Wolves, they can particularly defend their actions in the summer. But fair enough, if there wasn't going to be a huge amount of investment, you can still do other bits and pieces around that. You can still bring players in early. You can still identify targets early. And the fact that nothing was done early apart from Fer Lopez, and then so many came in late and clearly weren't the first choice targets. It's more than just the ownership, it's the recruitment, it's the whole structure. It's what's going on there in terms of how fit for purpose the club is at the moment.
Well, what is the structure? Can you explain to me what the structure is? Because there seem to be people being named that I didn't even know were at the club, involved in the club. And for me, who is identifying the players? Who is the person who's bringing the players in? For me, the manager should have a massive say in what's going on. Obviously, you can't get involved in contracts and all that scenario, but the manager should have a massive say the type of player that he wants, the level of player that he wants. And yes, he's limited to what the club are prepared to spend. Yes, everybody understands that. But for me, it's always the rule on effect, Johnny, that you need to bring in players 12 months or 18 months before players are actually leaving the club. So you've got a rule on effect, and you're not being affected by the levels of players that are going out of the club then. And that's what, for me, Wolves haven't been doing in the last 2 or 3 seasons. They're standing still all the time, not getting the players in quick enough. And when you're going from standing start at this level, coming to the start of the season, then you're going to struggle, and that's what we're finding now. And it's so disappointing, and it's horrible to see the atmosphere in the place, but very understandable. You mentioned the fans. The fans have every right to they pay a lot of money to go follow the team away from home. At home as well, they pay a lot of money to go and watch games now, and they've every right to voice their opinion and all of this. And there's a lot of people that are disappointed down there with what's going on.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things was a year or so ago, those season ticket prices were raised very, very significantly. And the reason given by the club for that was that they were benchmarking against other teams in the Premier League and other teams in a mid-level bracket of the Premier League. And then to see continued sales and see the team clearly on a downward trajectory, I think that's one more reason why supporters are so disgruntled and so unhappy with the way things are going.
Well, I've said for a while now, Johnny, that it's been overpriced for a while now. And the concern for me really is, and you want the heart of the club to be around the Wolverhampton area. And I know people, I work with people and people are disillusioned with the price, and they've been following the club for maybe 20, 30 years, and they're disillusioned with the price. They're saying they can't afford to go and watch games now. They'll pick and choose the odd game here and there because they still support the club, but they cannot afford the prices on a weekly basis. So that's disappointing, and especially for me, if parents can't take their kids. So where's your next generation of fans going to come from? You know what I mean? And as I said, you want the heart of the club to remain around the Wolverhampton area. You want people, you know, who are 10 years of age, 11 years of age, 12 years of age to be going with their parents now to watch the team, so they're going to become fans in the next 10, 15 years. And I can't see that happening now, because parents are looking at it and thinking, we can't afford to take the kids here because it's going to cost you 100, 150 quid out for a day out. And whenever you see what's going on behind the scenes with regard to the management side of things, then everybody becomes a bit disillusioned, and you end up with the atmosphere that you have now. But it's been overpriced for a long time, Johnny, 3 or 4 seasons, and I've been saying the whole way along that it's going to create a real problem further on down the line with regards to where's your next generation of fans coming from, and I honestly still think that.
Yeah, no, I suppose that's something we should really address at length in a future episode, maybe. But to bring it back round to the manager situation now, the timeline of events was that Vitor Pereira lost his job, and then quite incredibly, Wolves turned to Gary O'Neill, and we're led to believe that on the Saturday evening it was led by Jeff Shee, the chairman, and he got hold of Gary O'Neill, and there was the opportunity for him to come back to the club. What do you make of that?
I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe it. Whenever it was first mentioned, I just didn't believe it, because you hear all different things. Whenever someone loses their job, then a lot of names are thrown into the pot, aren't they? And you look at some of them and think, well, they've got a chance and they haven't. But whenever Gary O'Neill was mentioned, first of all, you know, he only left the club, what was a matter of 6-8 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. So what's really changed for him with regards to when he left the club? And what's changed since, you know, for him to come back into the club again? So, and someone said at work the other day that it's probably because they're still paying him. Now, maybe that's a bit cynical to say that, but I think there might be a little bit in that, Johnny, with regards to that. It's an easy way to save a little bit of money and let him earn his money a little bit. But no, whenever that was mentioned, I couldn't believe it that they were actually in discussions with him. Not really surprising that the discussions didn't get anywhere, because, as I said, nothing's changed since he's left, and nothing's changed from his side really with coming back into the club again. So the hunt still goes on.
Yeah, it was a fascinating situation, that, because the way it unfolded was that obviously Gary O'Neill was given the opportunity to come back. There was a contract there for him. Obviously, from his perspective, he'd have wanted assurances about where the strategy lay and what the future was in terms of team strengthening. But I think it also became apparent quite quickly that a significant number of the current squad weren't very receptive to Gary O'Neill coming back. There was obviously a huge backlash amongst the supporters on social media in particular. And it's always interesting when you have these things, because it then emerged that Gary O'Neill had turned down the opportunity to come back to Wolves. I imagine his people and his connections within the media were then spinning the story that he didn't feel the time was right, it wasn't the right circumstances, whereas I think it is probably more likely that he'll have had an indication of what the reaction would have been inside the club from the playing staff, and he certainly would have been aware of the way the supporters were thinking. So, you know, in that sense, it was probably best for all.
Well, you know, it's interesting there where you say that the players had an influence on it, because obviously in our time the players would have had no influence on it at all. You know what I mean? So it seems to be the new little thing where players are asked their opinion on managers coming in, or, you know, managers going out, or performances or whatever. The players have more of a say on what's going on. So that's a new thing. It doesn't surprise me that some of the players didn't want it, because players, Johnny, whenever someone gets the sack or a manager gets the sack, you'll always have players that are sorry to see him go because they were playing every week, or there's players that aren't sorry to see him go because they weren't getting the opportunity, or he might have been left out of the team. So you'll always get a mixture of feelings on that anyway. But with regards to trying to get fans back on side again, and, you know, trying to get the atmosphere of the club picked up, I just can't believe that Jeff Shee thinks that's a route to go down at all, because If he thinks that is the route, then he just doesn't understand the mentality of the fans and mentality of the passion that the fans have for a football club, because that was never going to work, and it actually would have gone the other way. The atmosphere would have turned even more toxic, and the first games that Gary O'Neill, and it's not all Gary O'Neill's fault really, you know what I mean, if he's being asked to have a look at a job, whenever the first few games where he would be taken, I think there'd be a pretty bad atmosphere at them, and that's wrong for the owners, the chairman or whatever, to look at that and think that's right, because it's just that if you think that's right, then you just don't understand the game and the passion that the fans have.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. And I think there was one game I remember towards the end of O'Neill's tenure. It was away at Everton when they lost 4-0. The absolute vitriol directed towards Gary O'Neill that night from the away end was like nothing else. He really had lost the fans on that occasion. And for me, there was no coming back after that Everton game. I know he hung around for a couple of games more, but I think that was more to do with the fact that the club was scrambling around for a replacement rather than wanting to keep Gary O'Neill. And I think anyone who heard that reaction at Goodison Park that night could not even entertain the idea of approaching Gary O'Neill. And of course, don't get me wrong, he did some really good things in his first season at the club when he came in a really testing time, but he never moved up to the area. He used to stay in a hotel. He never really had that massive commitment to the area, and I just think it would have been an even more divisive appointment. And also, going back to something that we know hadn't worked the first time round. But there we go. Gary O'Neill name has left the frame. And the one we've...
At the minute, yeah. I might come back into it again.
That's the thing, Robbie, isn't it? Who knows? Because speaking at 8:30 on Thursday night, Rob Edwards has obviously been approached by Wolves. That's quite clear. That's how things work. And is receptive to the idea of coming to the club. But Middlesbrough are formally saying that they're turning down any approach and are not giving permission for Rob to talk to Wolves at the moment. I mean, how do you see that going? The fact that there's been an approach, that Wolves wouldn't approach if they weren't being met with the right overtures.
I would have thought that obviously Rob Edwards has probably said through the grapevine that he would be keen to hear a little bit more about it. He can't come out and say too much really at this moment in time, but at the end of the day, for me, he dictates what goes on now, Johnny, really, because if he shows any inclination at all that he wants to go and at least have a conversation with Wolves, then normally it's agreed that he's able to go and have that conversation. Compensation, if they can agree between the two clubs, and that comes into play as well. But whenever his name was mentioned, then it looks like a decent fit, because obviously there was kind of big names mentioned with Ten Hag and Brendan Rodgers and people like that, and I don't think they'd be keen on the situation at the club at the moment with regards to where they are. So you're looking at a young coach again who knows the club reasonably well. He's spent time at the club, knows the setup well. So for me, yeah, it would be a decent fit now, and I think it would help to get the fans back on board. But obviously, there's conversations to be had. But at this moment in time, it's really down to Rob Edwards how far this conversation goes and how far the actual once the two clubs start talking, if the compensation is agreed, then he takes it as far as he wants to take it. Then so it's up to him to have the right conversations with the like of the Jeff Shees at the club and see if it can come to some sort of decent agreement with the thing. But as I say, you have to respect the views of Middlesbrough at this moment in time. So it'll be softly at the minute, but it'd be nice to see someone on board. As soon as I think they play Chelsea this weekend, and then there's an international break. So after the international break, you'd like to see them pretty close to appointing someone. So if that could happen, then that'd be great.
It surprises me to some degree that he's entertaining this. His reputation after Luton wasn't in a brilliant place. For what it's worth, I think he's a very good manager. He did really well at Forest Green Rovers with a really, really attractive style of football. Then moved to Luton, saw what sort of squad he had and completely changed, and took them on this glorious journey to the Premier League. And then obviously it didn't go well down in the Championship, although ultimately he wasn't responsible for taking them into League One. But The Middlesbrough job was a great opportunity at a really good club with a great fan base, a great, incredible training ground, and a really nice stadium where there's a project there that you can work on. And he's done wonderfully. He's done really well in his opening 4 months. I'm surprised slightly that that he's entertaining this, if that's what we're led to believe, and that he would consider leaving Middlesbrough, because I just don't think he's got a lot to lose by staying on at Middlesbrough all this season. And I think he's got everything to lose by coming to Wolves at the moment, just because it's such a difficult environment to work in.
Well, I think he'll understand the environment before he comes. But it's conversations at the minute, Johnny, isn't it? Really, he might have showed an inclination that he wants to have those conversations. So yes, those will probably take place in the next week or so. But you're right. You know, Middlesbrough at the moment, he seems to have set it up well there, where they're going to challenge for promotion this season. And when you look at the Wolves scenario at this moment in time, Pereira saying that he should have left in the summer before the season started. Lopetegui not so long ago walking out the door as well, you know. And you look at things like that have happened to managers and unsettled them over the last 3-4 seasons. You'd be thinking Rob Edwards would be looking at it and thinking, I'm not sure about this. So there's still a bit of talking to be done before Rob Edwards decides, or any other manager decides, that this is a good opportunity for him, because as a club and on the playing side at this moment in time, with 2 points out of 10 games, the club is in a bit of a mess at the minute, and it's going to take some sorting out over the next period of time. But as I said, the one thing that'll probably draw Rob Edwards back to it is the fact that he's been at the club before, and he understands the scenario and he understands the surroundings. So we'll just have to watch his space, Johnny, and see what happens, and see how the conversations go over the next few weeks.
Yeah, he's held 4 or 5 different roles, from a playing career to a temporary manager and some youth coaching and academy coaching in between. He knows the club inside out. He has worked for the club under Fosun as well. Took in charge of the club, I think, after Walter Zenga left and before Paul Lambert came in. So he has worked for Fosun. He knows the individuals involved. Matt Wild was still here at the time, who's the one of the football secretaries at the club now. Will have had dealings with Matt Jackson, who's leading recruitment as well at the moment, and obviously Jeff Shee as well. But it does feel a much changed place from those days when there was so much of the sort of ambition that was clearly coming out of the words of Jeff Shee and others surrounding the ownership of the club at the time, that doesn't appear to be coming out anymore. And it just strikes me as, I just think it's my worry for Robbie. I think he's not only do I think he's a decent coach, I think he's a really good man as well. And I'd hate for him to come back here and have his reputation sullied and have the good work that he's done at Middlesbrough go to waste if he came back into a club that, let's be realistic, is 99% sure is going to be playing Championship football next season. So I'd worry that what could happen for him here.
Yeah. I think you're right in saying that, but I do think there's an opportunity there as well, because if you can get Wolves back on track again and get them heading in the right direction, you know what the club does for you, really, because it's a fantastic club and it's a fantastic fan base, and you'd be regarded as a hero here, really, So, but you're right, unless he sits down with the like of the Shees and the board of directors or whatever, and gets guarantees how he wants to move the club forward, then he shouldn't probably be walking through the door then, because if you can't get those guarantees, then you're best staying at the job where you're fairly secure at the moment and seem to be heading in the right direction at the moment. So I still think that, yes, it's being mentioned with regards to as if he's favoured, he looks as if he wants to have those conversations, but I still don't think it's cut and dried with regards to him moving across from Middlesbrough to Wolves, because he's started something there, and I think he's going to listen carefully to what's said at Wolves and take things from there, because if you just sit back and see what's happened in the last 2 or 3 seasons at Wolves, then you'd need to change it a hell of a lot and get a lot of guarantees before you'd actually want to walk through the door, really.
Well, this is it. I mean, looking at the current squad now and looking at what we've seen so far this season, do you think the season is salvageable if there was going to be no investments in January? Do you feel that we're 10 games in now, so it's not as if that's a big enough sample size for a Premier League season of 38 games? Do you think this season is salvageable?
Well, I'm usually the most positive person in the world, Johnny, you know what I mean? And I'm finding it hard to take any positives out of it at the moment. I must admit, I've been to watch a few of the last few games, conceding far too many goals, poor goals with it. Yes, they've been having a go in games, but whenever you have a go and you're still beat 3-2 and 4-3, then there's only one way things are going, because you're not going to score threes and fours to win games of football. You have to pull together defensively and make it more solid. 2 points out of 10 games tells you everything, Johnny, at the minute. You know, they're nowhere near the levels that they should be, even to get out of trouble. Right, so that is a real concern for me. I remember, I think we played golf with Dave Edwards about a month just before the season started, and Dave Edwards said to me, I just said, how do you think things are going to go this season? He said, well, it's the first season that's really concerned me before the season started, because I think I can't see where the goals are coming from. Right, and then I said to him, well, I really can't see where the clean sheets are coming from, because that's where I sort of look at first and foremost. If you keep clean sheets, you've got a chance of winning football games, if no matter how well you play, right? But unfortunately, it looks as if both of us have got it right, because we can't keep clean sheets. We're not scoring enough goals. The quality going forward hasn't been the same as what it has been, and defensively we're just all over the shop at the minute, making too many individual mistakes. So, in answer to your question, we're really struggling to get out of the hole that we find ourselves in at the minute. But if someone come in and shook it up a bit, and you got 2 or 3 wins out of your next 3 or 4 games, Sonny, you're back in amongst the pack again. So that's the way you have to look at it. And as a player, you have to believe and keep believing that you can get a few results along the way, and try to lift the spirits of the club and lift the spirits of the players as well, because they'll be hurting as well. You know, that is an absolute fact. They'll be hurting as well. They don't want to be turning up to home games and the atmosphere's, not great. They want to be turning up to home games and everyone behind them, and the fans do get behind them, but there's certain scenarios where they just can't do it all the time. So difficult situation, but it can turn around. Yes, it can turn around pretty quickly, but at this moment in time, it's very hard to find positives in it.
Yeah, I think, going back to the point about the players and what their role is, I don't think it's a rotten dressing room. I've been witnessing teams in the past that have gone down where there's certain things that are rotten, and I definitely think the last time Wolves got relegated to the Championship and then carried on with their relegation to League One after that, there were rotten elements of that dressing room, and I think the fans, at the time will remember that, and there was certainly disharmony and a fair bit of discord. I don't think the individuals in the dressing room are bad eggs. If anything, I was at the Wolves Foundation dinner on Tuesday evening, I think it was, and it was fantastic. Jurgen Strand-Larsen, Totti Gomez, David Muller-Wolf, Marshall Manetzi, and Fer Lopez came along. And usually when you have these club events, they turn up for a few minutes, have the photos, present the odd award, and disappear fairly sharpishly. All 5 of them stayed for the entire night. And it was a long, long night. I'm talking 6 p.m. till gone 11. They engaged with supporters. They participated in there was lots of audience participation in the night. It was a big fundraising event. And, they couldn't have given more to that night. And it really, really impressed me that. Before the event, I did an interview with Marshall Manetzi for Sky. And he's a really erudite and really decent individual. And I was massively impressed by him as a character. And he didn't shy away from any questions or anything. And I know that doesn't get you points on the board, and I know it doesn't get you wins, and we have looked at a real disorganised rabble at times. Even the incident with Jose Sarr and the supporters at the top of the South Bank after the Burnley defeat, I thought at least he came out to talk to the fans, and he wasn't being aggressive. It wasn't a slanging match or a shouting match. He wanted to engage. I think Jose Sarr is probably a senior voice in the dressing room, and he's not playing. He's not in the team, and I just thought his reaction then was fairly positive. So I don't think they're bad eggs.
No. It doesn't come across like that either, Johnny. Whenever I watch a team that's struggling, I always look, and especially whenever the manager's under pressure, I always look to see if you can normally spot when the manager's lost the players. Right, you can normally spot that on the pitch where players aren't quiet and they're shouting over the bench and there's a bit of arguing and to and fro and going on. But I honestly didn't think that had happened. You do look at it, and Andre was dropped in recent games. Gomez was dropped in recent games. Joe Gomez was dropped in recent games, and you're looking at it and thinking, well, there's things aren't quite right there. You know what I mean? So
yeah, that's
maybe
a fair comment. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the atmosphere was changing with regards to the manager and players, but you couldn't. They have a lot of faults, those players. Yeah, you're right. Individual mistakes, but you couldn't say that they weren't actually trying. They didn't actually care about the scenario. Which you look at it and you think they all care about it. And they go over at the end of the games and try to clap the fans and show their appreciation for that. But in certain scenarios, that's a difficult thing to do, really. You know what I mean? Because they're all eaten up inside, Johnny. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
every result, every game they go and they haven't won another game, it adds to the tension. And people say, oh, they're getting paid so much money, they can do this and do that. But that does not come into it one little bit. Whenever you're losing games of football, then that's eating you up during the week when you're training and all that scenario. And like it, Jose Sa coming out and trying to talk to people and try to give his opinion across to it and showing how much he cares. I think that's all part of it. You know what I mean? I think there's a scenario where maybe you shouldn't really do that, but you should be able to voice your opinion as a player as well and tell people how much it hurts you as well. So, but it's this, the whole atmosphere is just difficult, and it's not really going to change much until they start winning a few games of football, and that's the scenario.
That's very true. And it is a really valid point you make about the fact that there will be players in that team who are unhappy with the manager, but that happens in football and that doesn't necessarily make them bad eggs. It's just a disagreement with the manager there. You're right about the atmosphere, and maybe it's something Rob Edwards can help with, being someone whose heart's clearly at Wolves. But it's going to take some turning round, because after Chelsea on Saturday away, we then have the international break, and then there's a few important games at Molineux that are televised as well. Actually,
yeah.
The home game against Nottingham Forest and the home games against Manchester United, and it'd be interesting to see what the atmosphere is like in the stadium for those, because now more than ever before, and I know there's been disgruntlement with what's been going on at the club in recent years, but now more than ever before, it feels like there's a total disconnect, and there's absolutely no buy-in between ownership and supporters. It just feels like it's broken.
I just feel, Johnny, that you can't take fans for granted.
Yeah.
Right. You cannot take fans for granted, and I honestly feel that the fans have been taken for granted for the last 2 or 3 seasons, really, and expect to turn up and sit and cheer your team on and make noise and support your team the whole way through games and stuff like that. That's what's expected of them. You know what I mean? And what's being delivered on the pitch by the people who run the club hasn't been good enough. So you can't take them for granted, and it has to change, Johnny, with regards to just the whole atmosphere. Yes, Rob Edwards can come in. Yes, he lifted for a little bit. The scenario where the owners will still be there. It comes down to results. And if Rob Edwards comes in, gets a few results, gets fans back on their side, then yes, there's a massive lift at the club, a massive atmosphere at the club, or a bit better atmosphere at the club. But still, the outlying thing for me is the owners will still be there, and where are the owners wanting to take the football club in the future? And that's what the question of the fans will be still asking.
Yeah, and that probably is what it all boils down to, Dano. Absolutely that. Well, listen, thanks for jumping on board.
No problem.
At this late stage. As I say, it's a moving feast, this Wolves manager situation. At the moment, it looks like Rob Edwards, even though Middlesbrough are not at all happy with Wolves' advances in that area, but it may be one of those where it gets drawn out and compensation just goes up and up and up until Middlesbrough reach a point where they're happy. It may be, it's unlikely, I'd say, but it's certainly well possible that Wolves have to look elsewhere and don't get Rob Edwards.
Yeah, Johnny, it might get to the point where Wolves aren't happy with the compensation.
Yeah.
Because they're not particularly, they don't like paying money out for that scenario, do they?
That's
so
true.
The compensation, if it's too much compensation that Middlesbrough are looking, then you might find that Wolves might back off themselves. So we'll just have to watch this space in the next week or so.
Absolutely. We'll have another podcast for you coming up in the next week or so. But if there are changes in the manager situation, we might get on and do another bonus one like we've done tonight. Muchie sends his apologies. Deno, we'll catch you next time, and thanks for listening.
Cheers, Johnny.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.